Jai Baba, everyone. We're ready to get started. Which talk is this, Ward? This is December.
December 14th is where we start.
Mhm.
We're thinking if we can manage it to do the talks of the 14th and the 15th. They're both about 6 or 7 pages. They're substantial. And also you're going to get a lot of new stuff today, no doubt about it.
So I hope everyone is taking advantage of having these things recorded. After we read through the two, then we'll have a quick Q&A session separately. All right, so Jim. Oh, actually, Ward, why don't you go ahead
I
and
have
bring
to
it up?
share, yeah.
Jim will be our
Okay.
first reader.
Okay.
Can you see it?
No.
Is it there?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just scroll. Oh,
Nope.
this isn't
We're not
showing
seeing it.
proper. Oh, you're not seeing it? Oh.
Mm.
Let me try again. What's the deal here? Okay, let me try again. Okay, share. Are you getting anything?
We're
Yeah.
getting it, but we're getting it not in presentation mode.
Okay, let me try that again. Okay, let me stop sharing. Yeah, okay, this is the one I need.
Yeah.
Okay. How's that? Is that
Excellent. Perfect.
okay? Let me scroll through the pages that we're going to look at today so you have some idea what's coming. This is the front page of 14th December. Then we're going to have this very unusual figure. And then on the next talk, we're going to start to get into matters astronomical. Yeah. And that will continue on to the session after that. So Baba again is moving his subject matter. He's developing a lot. Okay, let me expand this. Okay.
All right. When God, as the creator, point B in figure 14, created the subtle and gross universes, how did this process unfold? Exactly what happened? We saw earlier that the shadow of the light globe is the world. Now, what is this shadow of light but light itself in the faintest form? And what is the opposite of the gross? Nothing but the subtle. If the gross, as said, is light in its faintest form, then the subtle must be darkness, the opposite to the gross, light in its faintest form. Thus, the shadow should be characterized as almost darkness, but not darkness itself. Extrapolating further, we can infer that since the gross is light in its faintest form, and since the gross is the opposite of the subtle must be complete darkness. The opposites are always close to each other, which is to say that the extremes meet. This is illustrated in figure 16 on the facing page.
Okay, and I'll just show this,
Okay.
show this
Look
figure.
at that.
Maybe I should not expand. Well, no, it's probably better expanded. So you see A and Z are opposites, but they're very close to each other. That's what Baba is referring to. That's what this figure illustrates. We could come back to it in a minute and read the whole thing with the key and everything.
Okay. The opposites are always close to each other, which is to say that the extremes meet. This is illustrated in figure 16 on the facing page, points A and Z, the extremes, and as one would say, the opposites are immediately adjacent. A is closer to Z than it is to D. In this same way, darkness is closer to light than the faintest of faint light is, and it follows automatically by the same logic that the subtle is nearer to God than the gross is.
And this note is worth reading too.
Yeah. This explanation dovetails with the opening pages of In God's Hand, where Meher Baba represents the relations between light and darkness as an ordered descent from natural light to natural darkness to unnatural darkness to unnatural light. Unnatural darkness and unnatural light in Baba's handwritten account can seem to point to the subtle and gross as they are described in this present talk.
Okay. So here's the figure we're talking about. So Baba said that A and Z are closer to each other than A is to D, which you can see, right? Even though A and Z are opposites. And here's the key. Maybe we should read this too.
Okay. The mutual proximity of the opposites becomes a major theme in this lecture. In this explanation immediately prior to figure 6, in his explanation immediately prior to figure 16, Baba applies this theme to the interrelations of opposition between the Om point, the subtle, and the gross. The Om point corresponding to pure light, the subtle to darkness, and the gross to light in its faintest degree. The same idea comes up again in figure 17, as it is represented in the anatomy of the human eye. In figure 16, the theme is epitomized in points A and Z, which, though at great removes from each other in the sequential processional of the emergence of points A, B, C, D, E, W, X, Y, Z, wind up almost immediately adjacent to each other.
So you get that idea, right? In the ordered series, A, B, C, D, E, you've got a long ways to go to get to Z, but they wind up being almost immediately proximate. Okay. Now, I'm thinking we should probably read a bit and then come back to this figure when it gets, maybe after reading this paragraph, which describes it. Okay.
All of this is illustrated by the two human eyes, which are but the gross manifestation of the one real eye, as is shown in figure 17 on page 168. Consider the creator point, which is located at the middle point at the very center between the black and the white in the diagram.
You know, maybe now we should look at the diagram because this just won't make any sense at all.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So this, you see the third eye here, the white ring is the gross, the black ring is the subtle, and the point is the creator point. And that is mirrored in the two gross eyes, where once again, you know, our eyes are like this, right? We have the white of the eye, and we have the, what is it, the iris?
Iris.
And then the point of the pupil at the center. And in this diagram, we're going to have to spend time in our discussion and figure this out for humanity for the next 700 years. The mind is placed here between the third eye and the two gross eyes. But this looks like the forehead, sort of, or it could be. And Baba associates that with Brahma, the reality of God. And between the third eye and Brahma, he ranges the path and the planes, or the tarikat. You remember tarikat? That's the spiritual path. Okay, so this is going to take some puzzling over.
Can I just make a comment? My
Yeah.
understanding was that Baba said that was Ghani's head because he had a big head.
We're
Right?
going to
yeah.
see that when we
Looking
come over
down
here.
on it.
On the next page.
Yeah, okay. But I think that means that Brahma's at the back of the head.
In fact, we could right now, I don't know if you can read it. It says Dr. Ghani's head
Ah.
with apologies to, I can't even read it right now. And it says private, but we figured after 100 years, put it out there in the public. You know, I imagine many of you know who Dr. Ghani was. He was one of Baba's disciples, very, very brilliant, very, very witty. He would be the one who would provoke many of Baba's discourses by asking. So he was probably there, I would guess. Okay, here's the key then. When I read the key.
All right. This remarkable diagram shows the relation between the third eye and the two outer eyes of the gross body. Between these inner and outer eyes, Baba has ranged the mind. Between the third eye, conveniently associated with a point between the eyebrows, the Brahma, and Brahma associated with the upper forehead, are ranged the planes of the involutionary path. The pupil of the eye represents the creator point, or the point of light. Immediately adjacent and therefore opposite, the iris of the eye, corresponding to the subtle, is dark. The outermost ring of the gross maps, in this ocular analogy, to the white of the eye. Since it is immediately adjacent to the subtle, the gross is opposite to it, and therefore it acquires the attribute of light, though only faintly so, because of its far removal from the third eye as the source of pure light itself. The discussion of light and darkness here invites comparison with Baba's treatment of that topic in God's Hand, written by him in 1925. It is hard to establish with certitude from what angle of vision the head is being viewed in figure 17, since its perspective seems to be both from the front, facial, and from the top down. Perhaps this diagram is akin to Cubist art in depicting from both angles at once. On the left side of the source diagram below, Ramju alludes humorously to Dr. Ghani on the nature of the relation between Abdul Ghani Munsif and Meher Baba that would have occasioned this comment. See notes on the figures, pages 532 and 533.
So this is just a reminder that there's a whole section at the back of the book, notes on the figures. We're not reading it because it's too much to go into here. But once again, here's this figure, you know. So we can come back and review it later if you wish. It's a most unusual figure. I've never seen anything like it. Okay.
Okay, so should we have Melissa? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
If we could just start at the head of this paragraph again. This is all about that figure.
All of this is illustrated by the two human eyes, which are but the gross manifestation, pardon me, of the one real eye, as is shown in figure 17 on page 168. Consider the creator point, which is located at the middle point, at the very center between the black and the white in the diagram. Now examine your own eyes and the middle point, or pupil, located at the dead center between the concentric rings of the black and white. And you will mark that dark inner ring is closer to the point of light at the center than the white outer ring is. Then, what is the underlying fact of the matter? God is in you all. God is one. He has one eye, located at the middle point and center. From this middle point, the black and the white portions issue forth. As is for him, so too is the case for all of you. The God that is within you has both the white and the black, and these gross outer eyes of yours express this same pattern in gross form. But to see that one eye of his, which is the inner or the third eye, these gross eyes must be reversed in the direction of their gaze. Such gods with both gross eyes and inner third eyes seem innumerable. But the real third eye is one only and belongs to the one God, formless and nirakar. Shall I read the note?
I wonder, it's talking about the complexity of the manuscript and the confusion there.
Up to you.
This is probably more than we need to get into, I would say.
Okay. And
But
I'll just
maybe the
read the
second
dagger
one.
at the bottom.
Yeah, yeah.
The word God evidently refers to gross conscious souls. For though derived by the vision of their deceived, for though deceived by the vision of their two gross eyes, they nonetheless possess the third eye and remain, each of them, no one other than God himself.
That's referring to that sentence, such gods with both gross and eye, etc.
That Nirakar God in subtle form is a man possessed of Divya Drishti, or divine sight. Meanwhile, creation flows out from that point, stationed at the center. Through this point, the gross and the subtle are created. To see God the Nirakar, these gross eyes must be reversed. But this is impossible. To go to the sun is possible, but this reversing of the gross eyes is not. For even if the gross eyes should turn through some unusual surgical manipulation, the point or the 2 points of the two eyes won't do so. And this point is precisely what needs to be changed. To turn the direction of the point, the mind has first to be reversed. Once this has been done, the mind takes the points in the two gross eyes and turns them inwards, joining them with the point in the third eye. The black and the white remain and appear the same externally. But as soon as the mind turns, the 2 points turn automatically. These 2 points of the two gross eyes, when reversed by the turning of the mind, merge into the one real point of the third eye. Through that point, the mind begins to see the formless, the nirakar. Things unseen and unheard appear before it, and at once it sets out and proceeds towards it, which is to say, towards the formless Nirakar God. What all this adds up to, in short, is that the eyes must be reversed. The eyes must turn inwards if one is to see God. And for the accomplishment of this, one must surrender to a Sadguru. And here Shri launched into a familiar exchange of questions and answers with Datta Mahendarg, one of the Meher Ashram boys, on the need for a Sadguru and the supreme importance of love. This informal catechism had become a regular feature of these nightly sessions, and the boys knew it well. Baba went on. I'll read the note.
Yeah, read the note. Yeah.
So Datta Mahendarg is the son of one of the teachers of the Meher Ashram. Dati numbered among the 10 original students of the time of its establishment in May of 1927. And when the Prem Ashram came into being in March of 1928, Datu was selected for inclusion along with his younger brother, Pundit. Though we do not know with certainty what the questions and answers were, it is possible that these have been presented at the end of the next lecture on pages 181 or 2.
You know, it might be worth it just to look at that for a second.
Would you like to highlight where you want me to read, and then I shall?
Yeah, let's see. We're gonna have to switch pages. It's gonna be right down here. Okay, right, the screened out section there followed.
There followed the usual rehearsal and repetition by Datu. Shri concluded.
Oops. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Shri concluded, it is possible to see God when you surrender to a Sadguru who can show you this sight. How and when would a Sadguru feel prompted to do this for you, to show you the sight of God? When he finds you in real, unbounded love for God. Then do you all try your best, try to create this love.
So there is probably some kind of questions and answers expressing these ideas, and he would do this kind of routine. Unfortunately, it never got exactly recorded anywhere. Okay.
I say, one must surrender to the Guru, for without his help, the eyes do not turn, however hard one tries. In exchange for this help, the Sadguru asks for some recompense, some return, not in the form of money or wealth, but as love, real, unbounded love for him on the part of the aspirant. So do you all accordingly. Do you all create this love? And mind what Shri says to you. Those of you who are in the spiritual line, I can clearly see. Even those who are in the beginning stages have eyes red with the fire of love. They themselves can see nothing of this, since they are absorbed in the constant thinking of and love for Shri. But that, the thoughts of love and the redness of the eyes, Shri can easily see. Indeed, masters can at a glance judge from the very look of such eyes the depth of an aspirant's dive into divinity. And having seen, Shri can do the needful.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's
Oh, that's
have,
that one.
Yeah, amazing.
It's a
Let's have,
remarkable talk. Yeah.
Jack Burke will read as soon as he unmutes.
Yeah, that was pretty insightful, to say the least.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
well read by you, Melissa. Very, very well read.
Yeah.
Okay, according to Chanji's diary, Baba's lecture that night made reference to a figure characterized as an octopus. If, as we suppose, this is a reference to what is represented in this book as figure 23, on page 192, then this figure must have been drawn on a board by the Mondley and used in this lecture and perhaps the two that follow.
So let me, did I jump pages? No. Here, let me quickly just show you this figure. We're guessing this is the octopus.
Mhm.
It sort of looks like one.
Mhm.
Okay. And so we don't have any definite information on this, but it seems reasonable to presume that these figures got drawn by one of the Mondley on some kind of board, and they were probably on display for several days at a time until a topic got finished up with. Because he refers to the octopus here, but he doesn't really get to it until 2 lectures later. So that figure was probably right up there for the boys to look at while these talks were going on. Okay. Now we launch into astronomy.
World, the sun, and the moon. The point of creation, the middle point, and the white and the black worlds around it, which have as their equivalents the domains of the subtle and the gross, and which correspond to the parts of the eye, both the outer gross and the inner third eye, as depicted in figure 17. These were the topics that we discussed yesterday. So we have come to understand two things: the creation point and the third eye. These correspond to each other. Now we will go on to prove that God, to the point of this third eye, creates the subtle and gross universes. But first, let us ask another question. Why is the earth round? Beginning with the opposite case, that which is endless, indivisible, and one, if seen from any angle or any vantage point, seems straight. We proved earlier that God, as the Atman, when it took its first form, got the most finite form. For Atma itself is Anant, or infinite. Its form, therefore, must be finite. The creation of that form having been accomplished through the most finite point. Then consider the following.
Okay, we could read a little bit and then take a look at the figure. Starting from the Anant.
The Anant has its opposite, the most finite. The straight has its opposite, the round. The most finite must accordingly be round.
Now this figure, actually, there was just a big blank on the manuscript. No figure got filled in. So Nadia drew this. We see, to illustrate the principle that the infinite looks straight from any angle or vantage point, whereas the circular form is the form of finitude, and it emerges out of the Om point. This figure was used by Sheila for the cover of the book, of course. And maybe we could, maybe Jack, you could read this key to the figure.
Key to figure 18. In his introduction to a series of lectures on mystical astronomy, Baba enunciates the principle that the infinite, or the Anant, is straight, and that the most finite point, as its opposite, must be round. So all that emerges from the Om point, therefore, has a circular shape. Though all three manuscript sources have left space on the page for a diagram, none has actually supplied one. Figure 18 has, accordingly, been created out of the understanding and imagination of the artist-editor team. The own point at the center is a single point on the straight line that represents the infinite. Since the infinite and indivisible appears as straight form, whatever angle of vision, straight from, whatever angle of vision one looks at it, the own point itself is round, and from it project innumerable other entities, light, globes, worlds, etc., all of which take their circular shape from their own point source.
So maybe you could read this again from the Anant.
Sure. The Anant has its opposite the most finite. The straight has its opposite the round. The most finite must accordingly be round. However finite a point is round, and this is true of any point, indeed only the Anant or infinite is free from this roundness. Roundness is the shape of the most finite. Here, Sri recapitulated, drawing deductions from the figure that has been previously chalked out in reference to this discussion. God is Anant, God has its opposite, the most finite, and then again, God's opposite is the round.
Okay, and this footnote just mentions that the figure never got filled in on the manuscript.
Okay.
Okay, let's come to the figure in a minute when it gets introduced.
What comes out of the point must be round, since the point itself is round. In one of our earlier talks, we observed that innumerable light globes emerge from this point. It follows then that these light globes must necessarily be round in shape, since the point from which they emanate has this shape. We have explained then why the light globes are round in shape. Now, each of these light globes has its own shadow, and that shadow means a world. Let us take the case of one light globe as represented in figure 19 on the facing page.
Okay, now here's the figure. The light globe, the world, and the sun. So the light globe is up here, and its light its shadow, let's go this way. Its shadow is a world. World is a shadow of the light globe. For example, this Earth would be one instance of that, a shadow of the light globe. But the world casts its image into Pokol. You guys remember Pokol, right? It's hollow emptiness. And so the image of the shadow is not pure darkness. It's just the faintest of faint light. So it does have an image. It casts its image into the Pokol, and that image receives the light of the light globe. And then that light from the light globe on the image is reflected back to the world. Thus, the sun, which is the reflection of the world, is actually the sun. I don't know if you guys got that. Illuminated, we'll have to go over this a lot. The illuminated image throws its light back on the world. So the light globe, and I'm from various references, I've definitely concluded that the light globe is not gross sphere. It must be in this higher sphere. But it casts a shadow, which is a planet or a world like the Earth. And the world casts its image or its reflection into the space of Pokol. And that reflection receives the light of the light globe. And that reflected light goes back to the world. And thus, this reflection seems to the world as the sun. The world itself can't directly receive the light of the light globe, because if a shadow were to receive the light of its source, it would be annihilated. So it has to receive that light indirectly. And here's the key. Yeah, Jack, do you feel like reading this key?
Okay, I'm gonna have Elizabeth, if she can control herself. Elizabeth, I know you're exploding with questions, honey. Just hang on, deep breath, and if you can read for us.
Key to figure 19.
And by the way, here's one of the source figures, and you can see it basically down here. Here's the image, which is the sun. Here's the shadow, which is world. And here's the light globe.
The figure illustrates the fundamental principle at work in the emanation of suns and worlds from the light globes that are their source. The world at the bottom left, as the shadow of the light globe, is itself not pure darkness, but rather the faintest of faint light. As such, it casts its image upon empty space, Akash or Pokal. Meanwhile, the light globe, top center, since it cannot pour its light directly onto the world that is its own shadow, instead cast its light upon that bit of empty space, Akash, that has received and become a reflector for the image of the world. Thus, the light of the light globe illuminates the image or reflection of the world in that empty space that is the world's sun. The sun, like a mirror, now reflects the world's image, illuminated by the fire, by the light of the light globe back upon the world itself. Since the shadow is bigger than its source, the world in figure 19 is depicted as larger than the light globe, even though the light globe is far greater as the source of all terrestrial and solar light.
Okay. So maybe we could go back to maybe
Figure
from the
19.
second paragraph we have explained from there.
We have explained then why the light globes are round in shape. Now, each of these light globes has its own shadow. That shadow means a world. Let us take the case of one light globe as represented in figure 19 on the facing page. We saw earlier that wherever God is, Pokal or Akash is too. Hollowness or empty space. God is everywhere, being indivisible, yet Pokal or Akash accompanies him. So the initials, you want to read footnote 4?
That's an end note. No, we can skip the end notes.
Oh, sorry. So
They're all
the
textual. They're all textual.
initial situation is this. Beneath the creator point, all is Pokal or hollowness, and the light globe casts a shadow that is the world. Now, what happens? Onto this Pokal or hollowness, the image or reflection of the world falls. And this world, it should be recollected, as a shadow of the light globe, is the faintest of faint light. But since this image or reflection reflects the world, And since this shadow or world is the shadow of the light globe, the light of the light globe falls on the Pokal or Akash, which is to say, it falls on the image reflected there and not on the shadow itself. And this Pokal or hollowness in turn throws light back on the world. In this way, the Pokal or hollowness becomes the sun. In this way, the Pokal or hollowness becomes the sun, and it throws light on the world. Again, see figure 19, where the shadow has been identified as the world and the image within the Pokal as the sun. Thus, the image of the world becomes the sun of the world. And as such, this sun, this Pokal, throws its light back upon the world. The sun itself has nothing of the gross in it, but it is the light and the very faintest light of the light globe.
So maybe we should pause for a second here.
Mhm.
Well, that last sentence was broken up.
Just catch our breath. You want to read that sentence again?
Yes,
Right.
it didn't make sense the way I read it. Okay, the sun itself, the sun itself has nothing of the gross in it, but it is the light and the faintest light of the light globe.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mhm.
So all of this has been an explication of this figure, right? I don't know. Should we go over it again, or is it going to come back to it later? Here's the light globe, and its shadow is a world, and the world casts its image into a Pokal, and the image receives the light of the light globe and reflects it back to the world. That's where that's where a world and its sun come from. The sun is actually a reflected image of the world. That's what he's saying. Very strange, for sure. I mean,
Thank
this
you.
must be talking somehow about the derivation of the gross sphere from the subtle sphere or something. And let me just throw this in. There's a discourse where Upasani Maharaj said, the sun is black. And somebody asked him, why do you say that? And he said, well, that's just what I see. I see it starkly and clearly. The sun is black. Makes me think of this.
Yeah, I think that was real helpful going over that again. So Sam, you ready to
Sure.
move us through?
Started. Consider
Yeah.
Consider the light of the sun and imagine if the faintest light of the light globe falling on the image within the Pokal is so tremendously powerful, then what must the real and original light of the Creator be? Now, one might, why does not the world directly receive illumination from the light of the light globe itself? The reason can be explained thus. The world is the very shadow of the light globe, and hence the light of the light globe cannot be received by it directly, but only through the medium of the sun, which is its own image reflected in the hollowness. Take the analogy of a lantern. When lighted, it never illumines its own shadow falling directly beneath itself. But when a mirror is placed before the lantern, the light of the lantern, when it falls on the mirror, will be thrown on the shadow too. So to summarize, there are innumerable light globes. Consequently, there are innumerable worlds as shadows of the innumerable light globes. And there are innumerable suns. Now, another inference that can be gleaned from the analogy of the lantern is that the shadow of its own body that the lantern casts is far bigger than the actual size of the lantern itself. Indeed, shadows are regularly bigger than originals. In the same way, the shadow of the world is bigger than the world. Hence, the sun is bigger, indeed far bigger, than the world whose image it bears within its hollowness. Now we have seen that there are innumerable light globes, that the shadows of these light globes are worlds, and that every world casts an image into the hollowness that becomes a sun. Each light globe, then, has a sun. But as we noted earlier, there are 7 inhabited worlds. And of these 7, one is closest to the creator point. Yet that one world has a peculiarity, inasmuch as it is 3 in 1. That is to say, it combines with 2 other worlds to comprise a group. In spite of the fact that the 3 worlds comprise 3 shadows linked together, yet these 3 worlds represent a single light globe only. Now, since each world casts its own image in the form of a sun, this combined group of 3 worlds has associated with it 7 suns as follows. The first world, nearest to the creator point, has 1 sun. The second world, next below the first, has 2 suns. The third world, next below the second, has 4 suns. This association of the 7th world with 7 suns is depicted in figure 20 on the next page. Again, these 7 suns are associated with the 3 worlds, A, B, and C, of what has been characterized as the 7th world in the 7th range, projecting from the creator point. Yet in reality, the suns are only 3. The riddle of 3 suns appearing as 7, we will explain later. All the worlds, apart from this 7th world with its 3 sections, have 1 sun each. The scientists of the future will come to know and understand this. Now, as we saw previously, when the first world cools down and moves aside, the second takes its place. The third takes the place of the second, and so forth. When this first world has cooled down, and moved aside. The light of the sun falls on it, and it becomes a moon. This moon then throws its light on the new first world that has taken its place. Now let us look to the matter of the size and nearness to their respective worlds of the various suns. The
Well, let's
second
see,
world,
maybe
Oh,
we
sure, go
should
ahead.
why don't we take a look at this? Yeah.
please do.
So this is, again, this is representing what we've just been talking about. The three worlds, they're all shadows of a single light globe. The seventh range of planets has this unique feature that the first in the line is 3 and 1. That's not true of the other worlds, only this one. So world A is our Earth. It has one sun. World B, which is the second shadow of the light globe, has 2 suns, and world C has 7. And just to let you know that it's coming, we're going to have a figure showing this right here, coming up in the second lecture after this. Baba's going to dwell on this topic for a bit. And so maybe, Sam, could you read this key?
Sure. Key to figure 20. Among the 7 ranges of worlds or planets, see figure 23, the 7th is distinctive in that it is 3 worlds in one. And through the system of reflections illustrated in figure 22, the light globe, which is the ultimate source of light for all 3 of these worlds or subworlds, projects itself as 1 sun for world A, 2 suns for world B, and 4 suns for world C.
Okay.
Continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second world, as we saw earlier, has 2 suns. As 1 is opposed to 2, it follows that the 2 suns of the second world are far smaller than the 1 single sun of the first world. Moreover, these 2 suns are very close to each other. I can see this. In the same way, and by the same logic, the 4 suns of the third world are much smaller than the 2 suns of the second world, and much close to each other, so much as to appear as one. Why? What is more, these 3 worlds have 7 moons. Why so? All of this we will discuss later on. Knowing intellectually versus experiencing. And now, before closing for the day, ask yourselves, with all this that has been explained to you, what should you actually do? What needs to be done? All this intellectual knowledge is nothing. It commands no consideration at all by comparison with actual seeing or experiencing. Seeing or experiencing what? God. And how could that be possible? There followed the usual rehearsal and repetition by Datu.
And maybe this note is worth reading.
As noted in the lecture of the evening before, this little exchange of questions and answers between Baba and Datu Mehendarge had become a familiar feature during these sessions with the boys. Though we do not know exactly what these questions and answers were, their substantial content may well be represented in the following final 4 lines of this lecture.
Which is this here.
It is possible to see God when you surrender to a Sadguru who can show you this sight. How and when would a Sadguru feel prompted to do this for you, to show you the sight of God? When he finds in you real, unbounded love, love for God. Then do you all try your best. Try to create this love.
Okay, that's the
Oh.
end of the second lecture.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful readings.
So that's quite a batch of material, huh?
It is. So let me stop this reading, or did you have anything you wanted to tie up with before I stop the recording?
No, no.
Okay. And give me a minute to switch things around here, and we'll start the discussion. So folks know how to raise your hands for the discussion, and we'll start that in about 2 minutes.